I said some things and I did some things that I'm sorry for. It's not gonna happen again.
The crazy part is how normal he tries to make it sound. Ralph says it like this is just some uncomfortable thing between him and Tony, like he got drunk, crossed a line, and now he can clean it up by lowering his voice and saying the apology the right way. It is the language of a man trying to survive the truth without ever really touching it, because Ralph is not standing there over a bad joke or some awkward night at the Bing. He is standing there because a girl is dead, and somehow, before he even gets to this table, her death has already been turned into a problem about respect. Ralph is saying the words, Tony is barely giving him anything, and the whole room feels like it knows more than the apology is willing to admit. So before we come back to this table, we go back to the person Ralph is trying to shrink into some things. Before he walks into this restaurant trying to sound humble, Tracy walks up to Tony outside the Bing. For a few minutes, she becomes something this world usually works very hard not to see. There is already something awkward about the way she stops him.
I know you said we can't be friends, but there's no one else I can talk to.
She is nervous, but also weirdly hopeful, like she has convinced herself that Tony might know what to do with a problem this big.
I'm pregnant.
The second she says it, Tony's face tightens, because Tracy is doing something that makes him uncomfortable before the conversation even gets far. She is not approaching him like a boss at a strip club. She is approaching him like someone older, stronger, maybe even safe. She is trying to confide in him, and by doing that, she forces herself out of the category this world has put her in. Tony can ignore one of the girls at the Bing when she stays part of the background. He can let the business run, let the money move, let the girls be treated like property, because that is easier when nobody asks him to look too closely. But Tracy is standing by his car, pregnant with Ralph's child, scared, young, and looking at him like he might be the only adult around.
It's Ralphie's.
That is where it gets worse, because Tony already knows Ralph. He knows the charm, the jokes, the money, and the ugliness under all of it. Tony can already see the shape of what she is walking into, and the part he cannot fully push away is her age. Tracy is basically the same age as Meadow, and once that thought enters the scene, she becomes harder for Tony to keep blurry. She is somebody's daughter standing in front of him, pregnant and scared, close enough in age to the one girl his whole world is built to protect. So Tony gives her the practical answer, because on some level he knows exactly what Ralph is.
So you think I should get an abortion?
Believe me, but Ralphie's the father, you'll be doing this kid and the next 3 generations a favor.
Bringing a child into Ralph's life would be a disaster, and Tony can see that before Tracy can. But the way he says it also tells you how badly he wants this conversation to end. Tracy came to him looking for guidance, maybe even protection, and Tony gives her the kind of answer that lets him get back in the car and drive away without carrying too much of her with him. But he does carry some of it. Tracy's attempts to befriend and confide in Tony made him extremely uncomfortable, as it humanized her and forced him to see her as being more than just another piece of mob property to be used and exploited for profit. So Tony gets in the car and leaves. But the problem stays behind at the Bing, sitting right there with Ralph and the guys. Ralph is inside laughing, comfortable, surrounded by the kind of room that rewards him for being cruel as long as he makes it entertaining. And Tracy makes the mistake of challenging him there.
You asshole.
That's how you talk to a man in front of his friends?
What man?
She is embarrassing him in front of the men whose approval he lives off. And with Ralph, that is always dangerous because his whole personality is built around never letting anyone see him feel small. Outside, away from the guys, the mood changes, but the damage is already done. Tracy still wants something from him. Even after the way he treats her, even after Tony already told her what kind of disaster this is, she still has this little piece of hope left that Ralph might care if she says the right thing.
Ralphie, I love you.
That line hurts because she means it. She says it to a man who has already shown her exactly what he is, and she still reaches for him like there might be another version underneath the jokes. Ralph sees that, and instead of feeling even a flicker of shame, he plays with it.
I love you too, baby. If it's a boy, we'll name him after me.
He gives her the exact fantasy she is weak enough to want. The little house, the little life, the idea that this could all turn into something normal if she just believes him for one more second. And for that second, she almost does. Ralph does not just reject her. He lets her touch the dream first, just so he can pull it away.
It's a girl, we'll name her Tracy after you. This way she can grow up to be a cocksucking slob, just like her mother.
He takes the one thing that made her scared enough to go to Tony, the thing she is carrying inside her, and turns it into another punchline. He makes the pregnancy dirty, makes the future stupid, makes her stupid for ever thinking he would treat any of it like it mattered. And Tracy snaps. For a moment, she stops trying to make him love her and lets him see what she really thinks of him. That is the part Ralph cannot take. He can humiliate her, mock her, play with her feelings, laugh at the baby, and act like her whole life is a joke. But the second she makes him feel embarrassed, something in him flips. I'm not going to show the full beating here because the scene is horrible in a way that does not need to be replayed to be understood. But one detail matters. When Ralph turns on her, the violence does not only land on her face. He hits her in the stomach too, and once you remember she is pregnant, that detail becomes almost unbearable, because the baby is no longer just part of the argument. It becomes part of what he is attacking. After all of that, Ralph walks back inside like nothing happened. Tracy is outside, broken on the pavement, and Ralph comes back into the club with that same disgusting casualness, like the night has only been interrupted by something annoying. Before anyone even gets to her, he is already working on the story.
Slipped. We were arguing, I don't know. She fell.
He does not come in horrified by himself. He comes in trying to make her death sound smaller, cleaner, easier to survive. A fall, an accident, something stupid that happened outside, anything that makes her death sound smaller than what it really is. And when the men go out, Tony finally sees what Ralph is trying to talk around. Tony looks at her and, for a second, the excuses do not arrive fast enough. This is the girl from the car, the girl close enough to Meadows' age that he could not fully keep blurry. Now she is lying outside the Bing because Ralph treated her life like something he could break and explain away.
She fell?
It's my story.
You stupid motherfucker. How fucking dare you?
Something that makes this scene especially chilling is how indignant Ralph is about Tony being mad, like he genuinely can't understand why anyone would be so appalled that he'd just beaten a woman to death in a parking lot. His moral compass is so twisted that in his mind he was just exercising his rights and Tony is being unfair to him.
My fault she's a klutz.
And Tony's face right before he hits him is almost funny in the darkest way, because even Tony Soprano needs a second to process the audacity of this man. Ralph killed a pregnant girl and somehow walked back in like he was the one being inconvenienced. So Tony hits him, and for 1 second, it feels good in the exact way the scene wants it to feel good. Ralph is a piece of shit, and when Tony's fist lands, some small part of you wants to believe the room finally understood what deserved to happen. Ralph's biggest achievement in life might be surviving the rest of that night, because Tony is not looking at him like a boss correcting an employee anymore. He is looking at him like a man who has just seen something so disgusting that even his own world cannot give him an excuse fast enough. But Ralph does survive it, and the reason he survives is the same reason this whole scene turns rotten.
I'm a main guy!
Because somehow, he has a point. There is a young girl dead on the pavement. Ralph is standing there with blood on him, and the part that can actually become a serious issue is Tony hitting a made man. This was morally reprehensible and hard to watch, not Ralph killing an innocent pregnant girl, but Tony hitting a made guy. The irony is crazy. Because the second Ralph says it, the room finally has something it knows how to handle. Tracy is too human, too ugly, too real, while a made guy getting hit is clean enough for them to understand. There is a rule for that, a chain of command for that, and men ready to explain why this somehow becomes the part that crossed the line. And of course, Paulie jumps in like the family handbook just fell out of his pocket.
This is the boss of this family.
Thank you, Paulie. We almost forgot Tony was the boss. He is more locked in on Ralph disrespecting Tony than on Tracy lying a few feet away, because in Paulie's head, the room is already reorganizing itself around the insult to Tony. Tony has to drag Tracy back into the conversation himself.
Cocksucker was way out of line.
20 years old, this girl.
That too.
Even there, the words come out ugly. This too. Tony is the only one angry enough to hit Ralph for her, but the language of the place still leaks through him. Tracy becomes something he has to point at before the men remember why any of this started. Tony and Silvio stand with it for a second longer. And maybe that is because both of them have daughters close enough to Tracy's age for the image to cut through. It does not make them good men, and it does not wash away what they are part of. But in that moment, they see a dead girl where everyone else is already learning how to see a problem. A girl is dead outside the Bing, and the men around her are already finding a way to make the story about Ralph. That is where the drink comes in.
Want a drink?
Not the time, Anthony.
It is just a drink, but in this world, nothing is ever just a drink. Tony is offering him a way back into the room, a small public signal that all of it can be pushed under the surface so business can keep moving, and Ralph refuses it. He says it politely, but the politeness is the insult. He is letting Tony know that the punch still sits between them, that he has not accepted the way Tony tried to pull the room back under his control, and Tony feels it immediately.
Not a time.
The way he repeats it back tells you he understands exactly what Ralph just did. Ralph is not just turning down a drink, he is turning down Tony's attempt to close the matter. And somehow, after everything that happened, Ralph is still standing there like he is the one owed repair. He then takes the insult to Johnny Sack because by now he has convinced himself that he is the victim.
He hit me.
Johnny gives him just enough agreement to keep him listening.
He was wrong, believe me, he knows.
Johnny knows Ralph needs to hear that first. He needs his pride fed before he can swallow anything useful. But Johnny is not really there to comfort him. He is there to warn him.
Just tell Anthony you're sorry.
Because being right by the rules does not mean much if Tony decides you are becoming too expensive to keep around. That is the part Ralph has not accepted yet. He can sit there thinking about respect, rank, and what Tony owed him, but Johnny understands the situation much cleaner. The apology is not about guilt, it is about staying alive. We later see Johnny do the same thing on Tony's side.
He wants to apologize.
Oh, really?
Tony does not forgive easily, but that line gets his attention because an apology means the problem can finally be shaped into something he understands.
Would that put this to rest?
If it's sincere, it might relieve me of a very unpleasant decision.
Johnny keeps it practical. There is money coming in, work about to start, and Ralph is still useful enough that killing him would cost more than swallowing him.
Talking about millions of dollars here, Tony. Wouldn't hurt to throw him a bone.
That is the real language of the scene. The anger is still there, but business is already pulling it down by the throat.
You heard what he did. That poor girl just had her 20th birthday.
For a second, Tracy comes back into the room. Tony says her age because that is the part he cannot shake, but Johnny gives him the coldest answer possible.
But she was a whore, Tony.
That is where Johnny misreads the room. He thinks he is speaking the normal language of this world, the cold practical language where Tracy's life can be dismissed because of what she was to them. But Tony does not let him have it that easily.
You know, I don't want to talk about that situation ever again with anybody. You understand me?
It was just a suggestion.
Tony cuts him down fast, and suddenly Johnny is reminded that he is not sitting across from some emotional guy who needs New York to explain the rules to him. He is sitting across from the boss of Jersey, in Jersey, talking about something Tony has already decided he is allowed to feel. Tony may be hypocritical, violent, and full of excuses, but he still refuses to let Johnny reduce Tracy that casually in front of him. For a second, the conversation stops being about Ralph. It becomes about Tony reminding Johnny where he is, who he is talking to, and how far he is allowed to push. And that is how Ralph ends up back in front of Tony. The restaurant is almost empty, and Tony is sitting alone at the table with a plate of pasta in front of him, like the whole room has been arranged to remind Ralph who gets to be comfortable here. Christopher and Polly are posted nearby, quiet, watching, making the place feel less like a restaurant and more like a room Ralph has been called into. Before Ralph even reaches Tony, Polly seems like he is giving him a hug but is actually patting him down, checking if he is armed. It is quick, almost casual, but it says a lot. Ralph is not walking in as a respected earner coming to talk things out. He is being checked before he is allowed near the boss. Ralph walks in with that same nervous little smile, trying to keep some shape of confidence on his face. But the room does not give him anything to work with. Tony keeps eating. That is the whole humiliation. Ralph has crossed whatever line Tony believes he crossed, and now Tony is showing him exactly where he sits in the order of things. He does not need to shout. He does not need to threaten him.
You want to see me?
He just keeps eating, and suddenly Ralph understands he is not more important than the plate in front of Tony.
Yeah, Tony.
Tony barely helps him.
About what?
He makes Ralph explain himself, makes him stand there and drag the words out in front of Chris and Polly, like the apology is only worth something if Ralph has to feel every inch of it.
What'd you do?
Of course he knows why Ralph is there. Everyone in that room knows why Ralph is there. But Tony plays dumb because it forces Ralph to say it himself.
I was rude when you offered me to drink. And I disrespected the Bing and the girl. I'm sorry, Tony.
Every piece of it has to come out of Ralph's mouth while Tony sits there with the fork in his hand, giving him almost nothing back. This might actually be one of Tony's strongest boss moments. He does not forgive him with warmth, and he does not explode either. He just sits there, taking the apology the way a boss takes payment that was owed. There is no violence in it, but Ralph gets broken down anyway. The punch outside the Bing was Tony losing control. This is Tony using control. Ralph has walked into the room, swallowed his pride, stood there in front of Christopher and Polly, and said the words he was told would get him back inside. But Tony does not reward him with warmth. He does not even stop eating long enough to make Ralph feel like the apology mattered more than the plate in front of him.
Anything else?
That line is brutal because it gives Ralph absolutely nothing. It is not anger. It is worse than anger. It is Tony letting him know that the apology has been received, measured, and found barely worth reacting to. Ralph stands there for a second, waiting for some kind of release, but Tony has already gone back to the food. That is the humiliation. Ralph leaves the apology without warmth, but he does leave with something. Permission to keep existing. Tony does not hug him back into the family. He does not make the room feel normal again. He lets Ralph walk out knowing he has been lowered, measured, and allowed to survive. And later, the truth of that world becomes even clearer. He comes back in front of Tony, and this time the room does not feel like a punishment. It feels like business. The same man who had to stand there apologizing for what happened around Tracy is now being brought back into the center because the machine still needs him.
Making you captain.
Tony makes him captain. After everything, Ralph does not get buried under what he did. He gets promoted over it. Tony can hate Ralph and still use him. He can be sickened by him and still reward him. He can look at Tracy's death with some real human disgust and still come back to the same old math when the business needs a captain. Ralph understands that too, because the promotion means the world has corrected itself in his favor. The punch, the humiliation, the apology, all of it starts shrinking behind the title. That one word gives him back the thing Tony took from him at the table, respect. But Ralph still wants more than the title.
We gonna have a drink together or what?
The drink comes back, and now it means more than it did before. The first time, Ralph refused Tony's drink because he wanted the room to know the insult had not been swallowed. Now, after being made captain, he reaches for the drink because he wants Tony to close the wound completely. He wants the promotion to feel like forgiveness. He wants the glass to say everything is back where it belongs. But Tony does not give him that. Tony can make him captain because Ralph is useful, but he cannot make himself share that moment with him. The boss in him knows Ralph has value. The part of him that saw Tracy on the ground still cannot stomach giving Ralph the warmth he is asking for. So Tony leaves. And Ralph is left standing there with the title he wanted, but without the one small gesture that would have made it feel whole. Ralph wins, but he does not get washed clean. Tony compromises, but he does not get peace from it. And Tracy, the person all of this started with, is nowhere in the room anymore. It takes a dead girl, turns her into a problem of respect, humiliates the man who caused it just enough to restore order, and then promotes him when the numbers make sense. Tony does not forgive Ralph. He puts him back to work.